Have you ever stopped to think about the little things you leave behind? And I don't mean your legacy or your big life's work. I mean the literal physical traces of your presence. You know, like a neatly made bed in a hotel room, a dish left in the sink, or just the general vibe of a room after you've left. Well, today we're going to dive into this really fascinating idea from the writer Shui Fang of Life Chen Yuan, that these tiny, seemingly meaningless traces, they can actually reveal some deep truths about who we are, our character, and maybe even where we're headed.
So let's start with this quote. Whoa, that is a heavy judgment, right? I could imagine the guest's cultural cultivation and quality of life. I mean, what could someone possibly do to make another person come to such a huge conclusion about their entire life? Well, the story behind this quote, it plays out less like a philosophy lesson and more like an episode of a crime show.
So the author tells this story about visiting a guest cabin that he takes care of. And the way he describes it, he walks in not just as a host checking on a room, but almost like a detective arriving at a crime scene. And the evidence of the person who stayed there last, well, it's everywhere.
Okay, so the first clue is right by the fireplace. There's this pile of unused firewood just sitting there, with bits of wood and debris scattered all over the floor. Right away, it paints this picture of carelessness, right? Just a total lack of attention to the simple job of cleaning up after yourself.
The trail of clues then leads into the kitchen. And, surprise, surprise, it's pretty much the same story. A whole stack of dirty pots, pans, and bowls just piled up by the sink. And we're not talking about one forgotten coffee mug here. This is a clear pattern of neglect. But then the investigation goes from the public space of the living room into the really personal space of the bedroom. And this is where it gets kind of gross. He finds a pillow so deeply stained that the filth has actually soaked all the way through the pillowcase and into the pillow itself. I mean, that is a really visceral, intimate detail that speaks volumes. But the final piece of evidence is the real kicker. It's a tablecloth, which was once white but is now just filthy. And it's been unceremoniously stuffed and hidden behind the bed. The author says that in 7 years of running these cabins, this was the absolute worst he'd ever seen. The evidence is just overwhelming. The story of this guest is told loud and clear, without them ever having to say a single word. And this whole story is the perfect setup for the main idea. It's kind of like a Sherlock Holmes case, you know? Holmes doesn't need to hear a confession. He figures out everything about a person and a crime just from the bits and pieces they leave behind, like the mud on a shoe or the ash from a cigar. Every single action is a clue.
So let's call this the trace principle. The idea is that, just like a detective, any of us can look at the traces a person leaves behind and get a surprisingly clear picture of their inner world. You can see their level of self-respect, how much they think about other people, maybe even their general upbringing. That messy cabin isn't just a messy cabin. It's basically a character statement.
So here's the big twist. This story isn't really about that one messy cabin guest. It's about all of us. The author flips the script and asks us to become detectives of our own lives. He's asking us to turn around and really look at the path we've walked. What clues, what traces have we been leaving in our wake? And to help us with this little self-investigation, the source gives us a series of these really powerful, contrasting questions. It's like holding up a mirror to see the effect we actually have on the world and the people around us.
First up, when people walk the path you've just walked, do they find flowers or do they find thorns? Are you making the way a little easier and more beautiful for the people who follow you, or are you making it more difficult and painful?
And what about the words left behind? Does your presence make people want to praise you, to feel grateful that you were there? Or does it leave behind a feeling of resentment, maybe even curses?
Think about the atmosphere you create. Do you bring light into a space with your energy and your actions, or does your presence feel more like a shadow, leaving things just a little bit darker than they were before you arrived? What about the emotional traces you leave behind? Are you a source of hope for people, or do your words and actions kind of add to a feeling of despair? And this last question, well, it's the biggest one. Are the traces you're leaving day by day, moment by moment, are they building a kind of heaven on earth for you and for others? Or are they, bit by bit, contributing to a living hell?
Now, these aren't just some poetic metaphors. According to this way of thinking, the answers to these questions have real, ultimate, lifelong consequences. Because these traces, they aren't just reflections of your path, they are your path. The main argument is really stark and clear. If your path is consistently marked by flowers and praise and light and hope, then you are actively walking toward what you might call heaven. But if your path is marked by thorns and curses, darkness and despair, then step by step, you're walking straight toward hell.
This all leads to a really radical way of thinking about the concept of a final judgment. I mean, what if it's not some single big event at the end of your life? What if it's something that's happening all the time, continuously? The judgment isn't passed by someone else. It's based entirely on the evidence that we ourselves provide with every little thing we do.
So let me leave you with this final provocative thought. What if the final judgment isn't one big scary moment in time, but just the sum total of every single trace you leave behind? Every choice, from how you leave a cabin to how you speak to a stranger, is another piece of evidence. The verdict is simply the accumulated weight of your own actions. So, what would the traces you left behind today say about you?